So let's look at the stuff for today. We started off talking about utilitarianism as a moral theory. Okay? And we noted that it was a kind of hedonism. So hedonism means that it focuses on pleasure and pain as the good and the bad for human beings. And you can understand these as sort of being flip sides of the same coin, right? You all know what it is. You all know what it's like to experience pleasure. You've experienced countless pleasures in your life. You all know what it's like to experience pain. Sometimes the alleviation of the pain can actually bring a pleasure. Sometimes the reduction or the interference or taking away a pleasure can bring a pain. Think about when you've had the pleasure of a friendship and your friend has to go away somewhere, and now you feel the pain of missing them, right? Or think about the pain that you feel. Some of you may not have eaten breakfast, or you may not have gotten your coffee, and you may be addicts to coffee like I am, and you feel a kind of pain, and then after you get your fix, or you get your meal, you're going to feel pleasure of being filled again. And this is an important part of life, and pain and pleasure are bads and goods. Every moral theory that we've looked at so far acknowledges that. What's unique about utilitarianism and about hedonism in general is it says these are the only real goods. All the other goods are reducible to these. So think about all the other things that we value. Like, when I asked you before, at the beginning of the semester, these are wet. One of the things that you guys said was relationships. Family, friends, maybe even your teammates. Maybe you enjoy being in classes with fellow students or something like that. You enjoy other people, you enjoy their company, right? That could be a good thing. Well, utilitarianism says you like that because of the pleasure it brings you. And those other people want to be around you because you bring them pleasure. And guess what? If you stop bringing them pleasure, they're not going to want to be around you. And you can offset this in different ways. We saw this when we looked at Aristotle. You can have a friendship where one person is getting pleasure and the other person is getting, remember, usefulness or utility. They're going to get some other kind of pleasure. So if I pay you to hang around with me, you enjoy getting money, right? Anybody here who doesn't like getting money? Why do you like getting money? You get the, what if I have any? I don't think I have any money along for this, but nope. We're on a cashless economy. We're lucky we have credit cards, right? But you could take the money out. You don't like rub it on your face and say, oh, that feels so good, right? Or smell it, or chew on it, or anything like that. It doesn't bring you pleasure. You can't, some people, do crazy things like they fill up a room with money and then they jump in it like Uncle Scrooge on those duck things. But, that's not real. You can't actually get any pleasure out of money. You get pleasure out of what it brings you, right? The utility that it possesses. When you go to a concert, unless it's, like open mic night and they're doing it for free, you buy a ticket, that band is up there, and they enjoy playing, and they probably enjoy having you out in the audience, but they don't really care whether it's, Mr. Barinholtz or Mr. Singh or Mr. Sadler. They don't care whether it's, one of these guys unless they're connected to him. All they see is a bunch of faces and, a lot of people screaming, and they're providing pleasure. But why are they doing it? Because they're getting paid. Likewise, there's people who alleviate our pain, right? Doctors, good example, doctors, nurses, emergency technicians, all these people whose role is what we call caretaking. Hospice people would fit into that. Nurses' assistants, all the way down to the candy stripers. They're all important because they alleviate pain, and pain is a bad thing. What else is important to human beings? Relationships are very important. Often not acknowledged enough in traditional ethics. What else is important to you? You guys talked about career, right? Very understandable. You're all upperclassmen. You're all at a good college. You're all preparing for some sort of career that you're going to engage in. I think all of you are in the career path that you're in because you think you're going to like it, right? I hope none of you are going into something and saying, God, I'm going to hate this, but it's going to bring me a ton of money, so I'm going to do this for 40 years, hating it every single day, but having money. Nobody here is in that boat? That's good. What you are? What are you studying?
Business science.
And you don't like it?
No, I hate it.
Oh, that's too bad. Because you're going to have to, figure out eventually if that's what you want to stay in. I hope that you can find something in it that will gratify you, that will bring you pleasure. That's what you're hoping for? Yeah. So maybe you just haven't found that thing yet. Maybe, is this your junior year or senior year? Maybe when you go to grad school, work on your MBA or something like that. Because every subject that you guys study, there's something very interesting about it. Otherwise, people wouldn't have wasted their time developing it. And there's things you can get hooked into. And your career could be like that. Your career could just be a way to make money, wealth, right? But your career could also be something that brings you pleasure. If you enjoy, if you go to med school because you enjoy actually healing people, and you become a good doctor because you like doing what you do, then that will bring you pleasure. If you're studying criminal justice because you have an interest in issues of, criminality and what we do with these people and how to make a better society, and you find yourself able to do something with that, that will bring you pleasure. These things will bring you pain too. Med school is going to bring you a lot of pain because you're going to be up all night, studying things, constantly cramming, working for low wages once you're an intern for a while. But ultimately, it's supposed to bring you pleasure, right? Criminal justice, if you're stuck inside a maximum security prison, which are, pretty awful places. Not even the food is good in the officers' dining club. I remember I was talking about this the other day. I used to eat at the officers' dining club, and the food was just like one step up from what the prisoners were eating, which wasn't very good either. And one of the things that used to drive me nuts, we'd have spaghetti. And every once in a while they'd run out of spaghetti sauce. So you know what they would cut it with? What's that?
Ketchup.
That would have been better, because at least ketchup is more or less tomato-based, right? Barbecue sauce.
Really? Like just throw butter on it or something?
Yeah, you'd eat it and you'd be like, what is this?
How do you make bad spaghetti? That's how I know.
Well, you boil it too much, Every place that the sort of institutional does that to its pasta. And that's the least of your problems in prison, right? The bad food.
Yeah.
So if you're working in the criminal justice system, there's going to be some pain for you. But hopefully there will also be pleasure if it's what you really like to do. Any of the other careers that you're going into should ultimately bring you some sort of pleasure. Now Aristotle talked about this sort of thing, and Plato talked about this in terms of the kind of satisfaction that goes beyond pleasure, in terms of virtue, right? Virtuous behavior. But a utilitarian would say, virtue is that which brings you pleasure, and also brings other people pleasure. So let's think about the virtues that we've talked about a lot this semester. Being a just person, right? Justice, if you're really a just person, it brings you pleasure to do it. And if you're not all that just, it'll at least keep you out of trouble, and so you won't encounter the pain of punishment. And if you're a just person, you bring pleasure to other people, right? You don't steal their stuff. You don't take more than your fair share. You don't treat them wrongly. You're not bringing them pain. You may actually be alleviating their pain. let's say you're the kind of just person who actually like evens things out. You see somebody being treated poorly, so you say, I'm going to go out of my way to treat them well. What are you doing? You're giving them pleasure or taking away some of their pain. What else do we have that people like? Well, honor, right? All of you want to be respected. All of you want to be treated like a person who matters, not be treated like dirt. Or as Hobbes said, with contempt. You don't want anyone to contemn you. That's the verb for it. Well, why? Well, Bentham would say what this is really about is a different kind of pleasure. It's not like physical pleasure. It's not like, sitting down and having a nice meal, or going out for a beer, or listening to music that you like. It's a different kind of more internal pleasure. But when somebody respects you, when you have done a good job, and somebody gives you a compliment, and they say, wow, nice job. You did a really great job with this thing or that thing. You put a lot of effort into it, but not only did you put in a lot of effort, I can see that you've got some talent at this. That gives you a kind of pleasure. What are you gonna?
I was gonna say, I guess the thing then that would make utilitarianism functional is that you also care about the pleasure of others at the same time, because
Yes, that's where utilitarianism is going beyond just ordinary hedonism. That you consider everybody else's pleasure and pain as at least as important as your own. If you were an egoist, you could care about other people's pleasure and pain. Like for instance, let's say I'm an egoist. So I'm ultimately just self-interested. Does that mean that I wouldn't care at all about how you feel or think or anything like that as a class? Well, maybe my self-image is tied up with, being a good professor, right? And I can't feel like a good professor if my students aren't doing well. So then I have to care about my students, but not because they matter in themselves, not because you have value on your own, but just because you're, an extension of me, in a way. That would be an egoistic way of looking at it. And your pleasure or pain, right? We'll get to you in just a second. I could care about your pleasure or pain, but only insofar as it affects mine. Because maybe I don't like to think of myself as the kind of person who inflicts pain on other people, So maybe I like to think of myself as a great pleasure bringer. I could care about that because it affects me, or I could care about that because you actually matter. Because your pleasure and pain are important because you're another being like me. Utilitarianism is saying the latter, that everybody's pleasure, everybody's pain counts. What are you going to ask?
What about something that brings both pleasure and pain?
Oh, that's a good question. What about something that brings both pleasure and pain? So Bentham would say you have to balance these out against each other. Remember last class we looked at how we would tally these sort of things up. So let's think of a classic example. Going out on the town and getting really drunk, that brings a lot of pleasure, right? That's why people like to drink, because not only is there the sheer physical thing of whatever it is that you're drinking hopefully tastes good, although maybe when you're first starting out it doesn't, and then there's the physical sensation of intoxication that people like, and then there's all the other things that come from it. Why else do people drink? Why do we serve alcohol at social functions? Yeah.
Just like use people, like it's a social interaction.
Exactly. It's what they call a social lubricant, because after like a couple drinks, people start to interact with each other. That's the word we use, interact, in different ways than they would ordinarily. They get a little bit more friendly. Now, if you give them a lot of drinks, then they're probably in trouble. Then they start falling down, or they start, like hitting on each other, or getting in fights, or things like that. So just, you don't want to give them a lot of drinks. That's why cash bars are usually better than open bars for most events. But now, so those are all pleasures, right? What are the pains that come afterwards. Or sometimes, very soon afterwards, yeah.
Like addiction.
Oh, okay, very long-term pain, yeah. You could become an alcoholic, and that's not a pleasant lifestyle, yeah.
Pain would be if you drink too much, you get in a hangover or get into a fight like you suggested.
Okay, so two different possibilities. One is, more organic and pretty likely. Depending on how much you drink, you're probably not going to feel good the next day, because alcohol is actually poison, right? And it makes us feel good at first, and then you keep drinking and drinking and drinking. It starts suppressing some of your bodily functions. Those, fix your hangover drinks, they have the things in them that your body is now missing because the alcohol is, flushed out of your system or bonded with it or metabolized. So there's a pain that comes with that. And then you could have all these other possible pains. You wake up next to somebody in the morning, you have no idea how you got there, and you look at them and you're like, whoa, what's this? Or you drive your car home and you crash and wake up, I knew a guy this happened to. It wasn't because he was drunk, he was just sleep deprived. He woke up with his truck upside down. Luckily he had his seatbelt in and just hanging from the ceiling. Lights out, middle of the night. No idea where he was or what had happened, just that he was upside down. And he got pretty panicked. That would be, pain, more psychological pain than physical pain. If you drink a lot long-term, the alcoholism, eventually it produces bad effects in your body, like, especially with your liver. What other things? Weight. What are some other long-term side effects of drinking alcohol that you can think of? Brain function, to some degree, right? So there would be one of those cases where you balance out the pleasures and pains. And some people might say, well, the drinking isn't even worth it then. If it's going to lead to all these effects. And you could add into it other things. Let's say, for instance, you're in a society that condemns drinking. There are some religions that are, very much against use of alcohol. If you're in a Middle Eastern Muslim country, not all Muslim countries actually observe this, but if let's say you're in Saudi Arabia, you're not supposed to drink. So if you do, they can get you in a lot of trouble. They all go to Bahrain to do their drinking, because the emir there is more receptive to it. Or let's say you're in a town full of people that look down on drinkers. And you're the one going out to the bar, and it brings you some social disapproval. Well, that would be a kind of pain for you, wouldn't it? Any of you like people looking down on you? Saying bad things about you? Probably not, right? That hurts your feelings, doesn't it? I know we don't like to admit that people hurt our feelings, but let's be honest about it. If people say bad things about you, you don't like that, do you? That's a basic function of things. So that could make that pleasure no longer worth the pain that it brings. If the pain becomes more than the pleasure, then you probably shouldn't engage in that action, a utilitarian would say. What we're going to look at today is some of the other things that go along with this. And Bentham talks about intention, the intention of an act, the motive, and then dispositions. So before we looked at just acts by themselves, an act is good or bad, depending on its, what do we call it, its utility. And what is utility? It's the propensity to bring about pleasure or to reduce pain. An act would have negative utility if it has a tendency to produce pain. So my calling you a bunch of names, berating you as a class, that would be an act with negative utility. And we could look at it just in terms of the individual being affected, like if I single out Mr. Menicucci and I say, "You're a terrible student, get out of my classroom, you shouldn't be here, I don't know why you're even at Marist, or something, you know, things like that, right? He should probably feel bad as a result, unless he realizes that I'm joking or I'm making it as an example, in which case it actually brings him pleasure because he's laughing about it. But if he thought I was really being honest about that, that would bring in pain. Now there's two people involved in this, right? There's him, that's bringing him pain, but let's say I'm a sadist and I enjoy getting pleasure out of that. I get pleasure out of imposing pain on other people. Well, maybe that would be a good act then, because if my pleasure outweighs his pain, well, that would be okay then, wouldn't it?
If you're an egoist, but if you're utilitarian, then you
Well-
would be bringing pleasure to the other person. So.
Well, if your pain is less than my pleasure, then even if I'm a utilitarian, it would be okay.
Well,
Because the net balance would be positive, right?
but if you're a sadist, then my pain would have to be greater than your pleasure in order for
to
you
bring
to
that
actually-
about. I suppose, yeah. I haven't thought that one out too well. We could also think about it this way too. How would you all feel if I singled out a student? One second. If I singled out a student in the class and started berating them in front of you, would you enjoy it? Would you feel uncomfortable?
Probably feel uncomfortable.
It'd make me feel uncomfortable. Would it make you feel bad?
Depends on how bad you're berating them out. I mean, if it was just, oh, you didn't do your homework, you know you really should get the stuff in on time, then, you know,
Yeah.
like, but if you're yelling, cursing, and swearing at them.
Well, yeah, let's make it that. I'm actually using swear words and, you know, talking about their parents and, you know, all sorts of things like that.
Then I'd be appalled, you know.
Okay. That goes beyond just feeling bad, feeling uncomfortable. Being appalled, that would be other people's pain. So if I single out one student, I'm a sadist, I'm getting pleasure from the act, he's getting pain from the act, but the rest of you are all getting pain from the act, then that's a bad act, according to utilitarianism. We tally these things up. Yeah.
But I thought pleasure and pain is for you, so it wouldn't matter if others.
Oh no, if you're a utilitarian, everybody's pleasures and pains matter. Right? That's what's distinctive about utilitarianism as opposed to egoistic hedonism. Everybody's pains and pleasures get taken into account. Everybody who could be affected by it. You know, if it's my yelling at Mr. Menacucci, we're not really concerned about what the class next door thinks. We'd be concerned about what you guys would think, and about what he would think, and about what I would think. So that's looking at things just in terms of the act. Now let's think in terms of intentions. And what Bentham tells us about intentions, he says an act can be unintentional or it can be intentional. And it can be unintentional in different ways. And remember we talked about this with Aristotle. Are we responsible for everything that we do? Or are we partly responsible? Or are there some cases that absolve us of responsibility? Do you remember offhand what the things that absolved us for Aristotle were? There were two main conditions that could get you off the hook, get a person off the hook.
One was how often they actually made the mistake.
Yeah,
Like,
let's.
if they had a good pattern of being virtuous, then they.
Virtue and vice, he said, we're responsible for. So the patterns are. But we're just looking at individual acts now. So you're looking at a person doing something, you want to say, are they responsible for it or not? There were two things that Aristotle said could get you off the hook. Anyone remember offhand? Or think about, you know, what you would excuse somebody for. Yeah. We're talking about what makes something involuntary, right? What are the things that actually make something involuntary? What's that? Force, or what Aristotle called compulsion. If I make you do something, then in a certain way you're not responsible for it. Or like, let's say I inject you with a drug that intoxicates you, and now you go out and you crash your car. Well, you're not responsible for that, right? Because I'm the one who did it to you. Somebody had their hand up. Oh yeah.
I don't know, ignorance.
Ignorance, right. If you're not aware of some of the particular circumstances. So, you know, the example of you throw a ball at somebody and you don't realize they don't know how to catch, and you didn't realize that the ball's actually, you know, very hard and full of lead, and it hits them in the head and they're dead. Well, you didn't mean that to happen, right? You were just throwing a ball to them. You were ignorant of some of the circumstances. Or you revealed a secret that you weren't supposed to reveal at all, but you thought the other person already knew about it. That would be a case of ignorance. And in those sorts of cases, we say that the person didn't intend the consequence to happen. Well, Bentham talks about intentions as well. And he says acts can be intentional at, you know, any particular stage. And he's not so interested in that. He's more interested in whether intentions are good or bad. And this is going to tie in with dispositions and with motives. Because oftentimes we talk about an act as being good or bad, depending on the intention, right? If in fact I intended to throw the ball at the person, let's make it a snowball instead. You guys all remember when you were kids throwing snowballs and having snowball fights? They probably don't let kids do that on the playground anymore. And there were a couple things that people would do that were sort of off limits. Do you remember those sort of things?
And make it into an ice ball.
You weren't supposed to use ice, right? And you weren't supposed to put rocks in the snowballs. I don't know if that was a problem for you guys, but you know, we had kids who would do that. Because, you know, rocks hurt a lot more than a snowball, right? Did any of you have that sort of problem? No?
No, it's pretty much off limits when I went to school. You weren't allowed to throw snot at people.
Really? What about the rest of you? Were you guys allowed to throw snowballs at each other? No?
Not in school.
Wow, that's part of winter fun. But I guess, you know, we gotta be, you know, kind and gentle all the time. Okay, so if we have an intention, we often talk about intentions as being good or bad. You told a secret. Why did you tell it? With the intention of making the other person angry. You told a secret. Why? Because you wanted to protect somebody. You wanted to bring them in on the knowledge so that something bad wouldn't happen to them. You threw a snowball that had a rock in it, but you didn't know the rock was in there. You just scooped it up and some gravel got in there. You deliberately put a rock in the snowball because you wanted to get that kid who's been bugging you all week and teach them a lesson. That's a very different intention, isn't it? You put a rock in the snowball because the other kid actually was throwing rocks at you. That's a different intention, right? And we can say some of these intentions are good and some of these intentions are bad, can't we?
Yeah, but you could also say, what about negligence? You know, you weren't thinking.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When we talk about somebody being negligent, what usually goes along with that is the presumption that they should have been thinking about something, but they didn't. They thought about something else instead. Like, what are some examples of negligence? Somebody's, you know, texting on their phone, and then they drive over a pedestrian. Well, they should have been watching the road, right?
Mm.
It's not as if they were driving and they said, I want to hit some people. Like that movie Death Race 2000, where you'd actually get points for running people over, right? Which I think has been remade. That's a very different intention than what's going on with negligence. I guess in terms of negligence, what you would have to say is the person's intention doesn't even match up with what actually takes place. They're intending something different, like to text their friend, or to check Facebook, or what else do people do with their cell phones in the car? Get rid of their emails, you know. Now Bentham says something different. He says, it's frequent to hear men speak of a good intention, a bad intention, the goodness and badness of a man's intention. And he says that's pretty important, but what does it actually mean? He says, strictly speaking, nothing can be said to be good or bad, but either in itself. But what can be good or bad in itself? Only pain or pleasure. Or on account of its effects, which is utility. So a person's intention, Bentham says, has to be judged in terms of its utility. So,
So it's not exactly the intention, it's the result of it?
yeah, that's a good point. The consequences that they are trying to bring about, the consequences that we say they intend. So the student who, we'll take the snowball thing, right? The kid who is the first one, the one who starts all the trouble, who gets a big rock and puts it inside a snowball in the middle of a snowball fight, and then throws it, hits some other kid in the head. That would be a bad intention. Why would it be a bad intention?
Because he wanted to hurt somebody?
Okay, but what's wrong with that? Bless you.
Bring someone.
Actually, they're you know, if they like hurting people, it sounds like, you know, so far, on the whole, it's a positive act. They did in fact hurt somebody. They hit them in the head. What's the bad part of that intention?
The other person's gonna feel pain.
Yeah, they got hit in the head. It hurts to get hit in the head with a rock, right? I'm sure some of you experienced that as kids when you got in rock fights. I know I got I got cut here underneath my eyebrow pretty bad in a rock fight one time. We were dumb as kids. We do all sorts of crazy stuff. We used to actually play a game we called Joust, where we get on skateboards and we get sticks and garbage can lids, and we pretend that we were knights, and we'd skate around and try to hit each other. And we didn't have any padding or anything like that. Sometimes somebody would hit in the head or in the you know, the chest or the arm, and of course that would be the end of the game for that day. Really stupid to do. Why? Because it brings about a lot of pain, right? Bless you. You've all heard that expression. It's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt. Okay, well that's what Bentham is talking about. What's being intended is that somebody be hurt, and could there be any other bad consequences to somebody like, say, throwing rocks when they're supposed to be throwing snowballs? Yeah.
Everyone else here doing the same thing.
Oh yeah, good point. Because you know we see somebody doing something, we say, oh, that looks like a good idea to do, or they did it, therefore I should get to do it, or well, they're throwing rocks at me, I better throw rocks at them as well. So it could bring about many other consequences, which are on the whole bad. That's all that makes that a bad intention. If you say something to another person about their appearance, you could have a good thing in mind, or you could have a bad thing in mind, right? Why might you say something to somebody about their appearance?
Does this dress make me look fat? You know, you say honestly yes to make them, you know, change it so they don't look bad. You can just say that, no, it looks fine, and then they go out and the dress doesn't really look that great.
Yeah, the best answer to that one is to change the subject. Right? Anytime that you get a loaded question like that, I think you've all seen that commercial with Honest Abe, where he kind of hesitates, and then he says it. But yeah, you might say yes, or you might say, you're not really going to wear that, are you? Because you think the person might look foolish. And why? Because you're concerned that it will bring them pain. When other people, you know, laugh at them, or, you know, make rude remarks, or things like that. Or they look in the mirror and they say, holy, how did you let me go out dressed like this? So that could be a good intention, right? You're trying to prevent pain. How could it be a bad intention?
If the only pain you're concerned about is yourself. Like if you say, oh,
No.
well, I didn't, well, like if I said, well, I didn't want to tell you that dress looked bad because I didn't want you to be mad at me, and then my intention would be myself, not necessarily what
The
that
other
person is.
yeah.
And
I was thinking more like, you tell the other person, you're not going out looking like that if you're going to be with me. Because you don't want other people to say, oh, you know, look at that, look at those two. But that could be legitimate from a utilitarian perspective. Because you're, you know, if their pleasure matters as much as yours, That means that your pleasure matters as much as theirs. It's not like you aren't valuable. What else though? I mean, could you say stuff about people's appearance just to hurt them? You do that all the time, right? There's a whole fashion industry that has a dark side sort of based on that. Where you know, people like Joan Rivers, she's hired specifically to say mean things about people when they walk in the red carpet. She and her daughter, I think, right? The irony is neither one of them are particularly good looking. As a matter of fact, they almost bring pain to look at, don't they? And they bring a lot of other people pain. So what makes an intention good or bad is what the consequences are. Are the consequences on the whole designed to bring about pleasure or to relieve pain, or are they designed to cause pain or bring about pleasure? Medicine is a good example for this sort of stuff. Why do we give people medicines that, you know, at least in the past used to taste bad, or which sometimes have bad side effects, or, you know, give them operations which are very painful? Why do we do that sort of stuff? That's imposing pain on people, right? Yeah.
The benefit outweighs the pain.
Exactly, yeah. That's a good way of putting it. The benefit, we look at it in terms of cost-benefit analysis. What is the cost to the person? Perhaps a lot of pain. What is the benefit? The fact that they're going to be out of more pain later, or they may even experience pleasure because of it. Good example, my birth mother just had an operation on her back 2 days ago. And why did she have it? Well, they tried all these other remedies. You know, some people get their back hurt. She was in an accident a long time ago. And so I don't know exactly what's wrong with her back, but something went wrong, and it causes her a lot of pain. So they try all sorts of remedies. First they try to give you shots, you know, cortisone to reduce swelling and all that. And then eventually they have to operate. And when they're operating, hey, they're cutting you open. That's painful. And of course they put you under anesthetic, right? But when the anesthetic wears off, now you feel the pain again. But why? Because it relieves more pain. And it can actually produce the possibility of pleasure again. So medicine, when it's doing what it's supposed to do, the intention behind it is good, right? Could medicine be used for bad ends? There are some doctors who have been employed to keep people alive, awake, and conscious so they can be tortured by, say, like drug cartels. The intention there is clearly quite bad, right? You're not actually alleviating pain to alleviate pain. You're alleviating pain for a moment so that you can put the person in even more pain. Keep them awake so you can make them feel even worse. That would be a bad intention for somebody like Bentham, right? But how do you tell whether something is a good intention or not? You have to look at the likely consequences. And the consequences could be changing depending on the situation, right? So there's no intention that by itself is automatically good or bad for Bentham. Likewise, he says motives. A motive is something like an intention, but it's something a bit broader. And he says, a motive is substantially nothing more than a pleasure or pain operating in a certain manner. He says pleasure is in itself a good, even setting aside immunity from pain, the only good. Pain is an evil. And this alike is true of every sort of pain, every sort of pleasure. It follows, therefore, immediately and incontestably, there's no such thing as any sort of motive that is in itself a bad one. It all depends on whether the motive brings about pain or pleasure. And what does he mean by motives? He thinks about things like, he calls it amity, but we would call it friendship, right? Your friendships that you have, those are motives. You do the things that you do with your friends or towards your friends because that's what it is to be a friend. Honor could be a motive. You want people to look up to you. Religion could be a motive, according to Bentham. You know, you're a religious person and your faith teaches that you should do X, Y, Z. You feel better when you do X, Y, Z. You feel bad when you don't do it, because your fellow co-religionists are telling you you're a bad person or you're screwing up. That can be a motive. There's all different possible motives. Money's a motive, right? We do a lot of things that we do for money. Success can be a motive. Liking a person can be a motive. Disliking a person can be a motive. If you really dislike a person, what do you want to do? You'd like them to feel some pain, right? Now, no motive in and of itself, Bentham says, is good or bad. It all depends on whether that motive tends to bring about pleasure or pain, not just for you, but for everybody concerned. So he says, it's common to speak of actions as proceeding from good or bad motives. A lot of people want to judge. Let me sort of reverse this. So a lot of people look at it this way. Aristotle, for example, would be somebody like this. Virtue ethics would do this. Right? An action is good or bad. How do you tell? Well, in part, you look at the motive. When we get to Kant, a couple weeks from now, he's going to look only at the motive. Aristotle would say you also have to look at the action itself and the structure of the action. But some people would say you look solely at the motive. And if the motive is good, then the action is good. If the motive is bad, the action is bad. Even if it brings about good consequences, if it starts with a bad motive, it would be a bad action on that account, right? So if your motivation was hatred of another person, let's say, for example, how many of you would be somebody that we could hate, that would be a bad person around today? Like if they were removed from the world would be a better place. Or you don't even necessarily have to hate them, just think that the world would be a better place without them. Kim Jong-il. North Korea is probably the closest thing that you can come to hell on Earth right now. It's a totalitarian country. If you've ever done any research into it, you see that it makes many other places look like paradises in comparison, just with the sheer amount of misery that Kim Jong-il has managed to impose on his country, just like his dad before him. And his son will probably do the same thing. So, let's say you could get rid of this tyrant. And your motive was actually to get rid of a tyrant. Let's say, they snuck you in, the CIA, and you're a sniper, and you take him out, that would be a good thing, right? Good motive. Even though, it's taking a human life. What if it threw the country into chaos, even worse chaos than it currently is? That's not what you intended, right? That would be a byproduct of it. That would be a consequence, though. And if you think that motives are the most important thing, you would say that's a good action, even if it turns out to have bad consequences. Or let's take a medical example, right? There are many cases where a doctor will prescribe something and it ends up having bad consequences. But the doctor didn't intend for those bad consequences to take place. The motive was actually that of healing the patient. This is, what the medical profession does, and the way that it does it is by prescribing, either medications or operations or things like that. It could have bad consequences, but that's not what the whole idea was. The idea is to actually relieve pain, to improve people's quality of life. That's what medicine is about.
So does the action actually matter, or is it just solely the motive that matters?
That's a good question. It depends on the moral theory. And the reason I'm putting this up here is
well, for utilitarians.
well, that's where we get to, for utilitarian, it's not the motive. Not even the action itself. This is what counts the most, the consequences. Pain, because the consequences are pleasure or pain. The action is how pain or pleasure is produced, and the motive is the reason why the action is engaged in. So, you know, if having people pursue wealth as a motive, well, oftentimes we look down on people who pursue wealth, don't we? So they're greedy, you know.
So how does he said the most important part is the intention. How does the intention matter? All that matters is the consequence.
The intention isn't the most important thing for a utilitarian.
Okay.
What I was saying, when I was contrasting it to moral theories where the intention or the motive is the most important thing. Like what we're going to study, you know, Kant's deontology fairly soon. Or virtue ethics to a certain extent. You know, the intention or the motive is very important. You look at why somebody does the things they do. For a utilitarian, what matters most are the consequences. And the why of it is measured in terms of its likely consequences. So, I mean, if somebody had a motive like, well, I want to produce as much pleasure as possible, that would be just fine. You would count that as a good motive. Usually we don't think of these things so directly in terms of pleasures and pains. We talk about people being motivated by wealth or friendship or religion. You know, when we ask what makes somebody tick, what makes them do the things that they do, what makes them act the way that they do. Or we ask this about groups, right? What makes that clique or that group or that community act the way that they do. Or we ask this about institutions. What makes the Army act the way that it does? What makes the town of Poughkeepsie, whatever their council is, act the way that they do? What makes Marist College act the way that it does? You know, for example, Marist is really devoted to sustainability and being green and all that sort of stuff. That would be an example of a motive. Bentham would say, that's all fine. Does it produce more pleasure than pain? That's all we really care about in the end. So motives are measured in terms of their capacity to produce pleasures and pains. The last thing that he talks about in the stuff that we read for today is dispositions. And we haven't used this term very much before, but you guys are already familiar with it. If you have a disposition to do something, that's a tendency, a habit of doing something, right? So you all have a disposition to show up here at 8 o'clock in the morning, and that's why you're here. Some of you think about it each day. Do I really need to go to class? Yes, I do need to go to class. Most of you, I think, don't. Most of you get up and do whatever it is that you do in the morning, brush your teeth, comb your hair, take a shower, you know, put on some clothes, eat breakfast or don't eat breakfast, and you get yourself in here, and boom, class starts, and it's underway before you thought about anything, right? Does it sound familiar? Especially in the morning, right? Where you've got these sort of habits set up. And you guys have set up these habits for a long time because you're all upperclassmen, so you've been doing this college thing for a while. And actually, some of you may find yourself waking up too early once you're on Thanksgiving break because you're used to 8 o'clock classes. So you're going to find yourself waking up at 8 o'clock and then saying, oh, wait a second, I don't have to go to class. You have a disposition. It's sort of like being set in motion, you know, until something changes your course. You've got that inertia going that way. It's the same way with moral actions. We have dispositions. Some of us are more naturally, or not naturally, but second nature, courageous. We're willing to stand up for what we think is right. Others are less likely to do that. Some of us fly off the handle too easily. We have bad dispositions when it comes to anger. Some of us are more patient with other people. Some of us are maybe too patient. We never get angry, right? We talked about this with Aristotle. Virtues and vices are dispositions. What does Bentham tell us about dispositions? I think you can probably guess. So if we have motives and we have intentions, and we also have this broader thing of disposition, or habit, Or another thing you could think of is character.
Wouldn't that go under action though? Disposition?
Well, it produces it. But that's a good question. If you think about this, if you have a disposition for a certain type of behavior, you're not actually doing it all the time, right? So if you have a disposition towards self-indulgence in say, food or drink or something like that, that doesn't mean that you're always performing that action. The action comes out of the disposition in the circumstances. Or if you have a good disposition with respect to that what we call temperance or moderation. In a certain sense, you're being moderate all the time, right? By not eating all the time or not drinking all the time. But it's really only when you have the occasion and you have to exercise self-control. If you're an angry person, that doesn't mean you're actually angry all the time, but that's a disposition. Getting angry when you shouldn't get angry or holding grudges, that would be an example of an action that expresses the disposition. Everybody, that's a good question. Is everyone clear about the difference between an action and a disposition? So, what do you think Bentham's idea about dispositions is going to be? What makes them good or bad? Because we tend to look at some dispositions as good and some as bad. Like somebody who's greedy, is that a good or bad thing?
Bad thing.
Yeah, we look at it that they're a bad person, right? Or think of the 7 deadly sins, right? You've all seen that movie 7. What are the other bad things to do? Greedy, lustful. What's that? Gluttony. Would be gluttonous, I guess would be the adjective. Slothful, to be lazy. Wrathful. Is that 5? Yeah. So we're missing 2. Be prideful. Nobody likes prideful people, right? They're a pain to be around. You start telling a story, they've got a better story than yours. Anyone remember what the other one was? Envy, right. And envy, that's kind of an ugly trait too, isn't it? Right? Hard to get away from. I know I feel envious myself sometimes when I see the success of my peers, and I don't like it. I know that's a bad disposition. But is it really? That's the way we tend to think of things. Now let's look at it as a utilitarian. Let's take envy, right? What's so bad about envy?
If you care too much about what other people think, you don't have an appreciation for yourself and how you're doing. So it could bring you pain if you're looking at it. As utilitarian.
That's it. We have to look at it in terms of pain and pleasure. Envy is actually feeling pain at somebody else's success or good things happening to them, right? To be envious of another person means that you actually feel bad because they're doing well. But is that so bad? Could envy bring about any good consequences? Yeah.
It can be motivating for like competitive friends.
Yeah. I mean, think about our economy. A lot of it's based on this being motivated by wanting to have what the other person has, wanting to sort of put yourself back up on their level. That drives our economy. And maybe that's a good thing, because what are the alternatives? What are the other possible economies? Well, we could go back to the Middle Ages. Anyone want to do that? No? Anyone want to be under a command economy like communism? All of you have picked your jobs. If you were like in communist China, you don't pick your job. They pick your job for you, and you do what they want you to do. And you probably started studying for when you're about 4 or 5. You're on that track. Maybe envy, and I'm not actually saying that this is true. I'm just putting this out there as a line of argument. Maybe envy as a disposition from a utilitarian perspective could actually be a good thing. Wrath is a harder one to do, but greed could fit in with that, right? You've all heard that famous speech, "Greed is good," from Wall Street. What was he saying? He was saying, well, greed is good because it actually motivates us to try to produce more, and ultimately that will produce more pleasures than pains. Now you could contest it. You could say, no, it actually brings about more pains because it screws things up. You know, look at these bubbles that get created, and then the economy goes to crap. But what are you actually focusing on? Consequences, right? Everything for a utilitarian has to ultimately be evaluated in terms of consequences, in terms of whether it overall creates pleasure or overall creates pain. There's nothing that's good or bad in and of itself. No motive, no disposition, no intention by itself is automatically good or bad. No action is automatically good or bad. You actually have to look at what its likely consequences are. This is a very different way of looking at things, isn't it?
Well, you could look at even wrath. Like, our government put its wrath on the Middle East to get out Bin Laden.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a good thing. It brought a lot of people pleasure. But then it brought them pain, but pleasure outweighed the pain. But
Yeah,
if you're greedy, and you're greedy saying like, okay, you know, I want everybody in my company to do very well.
Yeah.
Some be greedy, you know, not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're just greedy, oh, I want $1 billion and I'm gonna, you know, kill everybody who disagrees with me, then, you know, that'd be bad.
Yeah, it depends very much on how it manifests itself in action and then what consequences it leads to. It's interesting you bring up these policy things, because oftentimes as Americans, we look at, say like war, in terms of our casualties, and we do a cost-benefit analysis. Was the Iraq war worth it? We look at how many Americans died. We tend to only focus in on the military people, not all the other people that we brought over there. All these mercenaries that we hired who died as well. And then we balance it against the costs. Those are all costs. And then we say, what benefit did it bring us? Well, we're keeping the war over there. We're getting rid of the totalitarian regime. We're safer over here. That sort of thing. What are we missing? What are we not focusing on? If we want to look at it as a utilitarian.
You know, we'll focus on their pain and what.
Yeah, did we leave anybody else out? Think about the first Iraq War, not just this one that we've gotten into. The first Iraq War, it was seen as just an amazing success because we only had about 100 casualties. And a lot of those were friendly fire. But how many Iraqis actually died? Just in the war. I mean, we napalmed people. And we carpet bombed the Iraqi army. They were in their bunkers. We dropped bombs on them and sealed hundreds of thousands of people into bunkers. We leave that out. And a utilitarian wouldn't do that. A utilitarian, you have to actually look at the broader picture. I'm going to leave you on this thing, actually. You could think of it, there's a guy out there, Peter Singer, and he is a contemporary utilitarian. I think you may have heard me mention him before. He would broaden it even to include animals. So if we were going to think about, should we be eating cows, right? Eating beef? We would have to take into account the pleasure and pain that is felt by those animals. I wouldn't go so far as him. I'm not actually a utilitarian myself, and I think there's a lot of utilitarians out there that think that human beings are somehow, more important than animals. Yeah.
Isn't that kind of what, like, the animal thing, like the Hasidic Jews kind of believe in? Like you can't bring pleasure, you can't bring pain to the animal when you're killing it?
Yeah, although they do bring some pain, like you think of like kosher butchering, where they pull it up by the leg. It's a good question. The kosher laws, so far as I understand them, I'm not an expert on this sort of thing, are largely focused on maintaining the proper relationship between the human being and God, and creation, and using creation in the right way. So The butchering is supposed to, the way they do it is they pull the animal up and then they cut its throat and all the blood runs out. The idea is you're not supposed to be consuming blood. And it has a side effect of being in some ways a more humane way of butchering than what we do in our slaughterhouses, where it's just, you know, cattle coming through and some guy with essentially a gun who puts it up to the cattle's head, pushes the button, goes into the cattle's head, kills it. And the cattle can actually see all the other cattle getting killed on the way. And they don't like it, you know. So in a way, from a utilitarian perspective, kosher butchering could be more humane, so it could be more of a good thing. It would really depend on whether you're considering the animal's pain or pleasure. Some utilitarians, like Peter Singer, would say you have to. Other utilitarians would say that you shouldn't. But most of the utilitarians are actually, again, if they're for animal stuff, they're usually against killing animals anyway, because that's going to bring about pain. But usually the ways in which we raise them, ultimately to kill them, brings about a lot of pain too. Think about veal cages, right? You know, they can't move around. So that's what I want to leave you on, that cheery thought. And I'll see you Monday, and then we'll pick up with John Stuart Mill on qualitative utilitarianism.